My Wife's Movie Club watched Labyrinth, a 1986 film starring David Bowie, Jennifer Connelly, and Jim Henson's Muppets. It was written by at least three people, Jim Henson and Terry Jones among them. This is a coming-of-age story, a morality tale, with a heroine attempting to navigate her life of dreams and false promises infused with real-life consequences. The movie starts with Sarah, living in a fantasy world, reciting lines from a book, and dressed in a fanciful gown. She is pulled out of the fantasy by rain and her responsibilities to babysit her stepbrother. She has an argument with her stepmother, which is significant to the story, and she retreats to her room, which is filled with dolls and trinkets and objects that reflect her fantasy world. If you pay attention, you can see most of the characters in the story and the labyrinth itself in her room. Then, Sarah moves back into her imaginary world, and this time we see it from her point of view. It starts with her dream of the innocent child being taken away by her request, and then an instant regret when he is. She really did not want her responsibilities to be taken away, but she thought she did. Seeing it happen awakes her to a quest to reclaim it. Fantasy is a fanciful mental image, an idea with no basis in reality. As a medium, it can be fun to escape from reality and use the format to imagine wonderful conflicts to overcome, but it can also leave you with an unrealistic expectation, disappointment, and depression. The temptation of giving up the child or her innocence is based on a natural tendency and a world-taught fantasy where responsibility is not required. But this is not real, and the reality of it has yet to fully dawn on her. The Labyrinth tells us things are not always what they seem, and reality is not always the fairy tale fantasy that you may have been told or may come to expect. Remember, outside the labyrinth, Hoggle is killing fairies, and Sarah, thinking he is the monster, picks one up and is bitten by one, and Hoggle says, "What did you expect fairies to do?" Well, she obviously didn't expect them to bite her. The fairies are an obvious reference to the fantasy world, and the bite, the harsh reality that the images and movies are not telling you, and it tells you that they're not telling you the whole story. The promises of these stories and dreams do not always translate well into what is actually seen. Like promises of many politicians, they shouldn't be trusted because we know too well they are empty words and we have seen what the actual results are. In this world, there is a contrast between the fantasy, the dreams, the desires, versus the realities of life, choices and consequences, responsibilities. The bog of unquenchable stench and the piles of garbage that her room reside in, they showcase the hidden truth behind the empty promises and false narratives. David Bowie was chosen to be the embodiment of this concept. The young woman, Sarah, looks to the pop star as idols, they not realizing they have little to offer. Distractions, entertainment, fantasy, false promises, but not responsibility, not the reality of the consequences. The picture of Sarah's mother, the actress, is someone who wanted her fantasy and went for it, leaving her husband and child to enjoy the company of something her fantasies had nourished. It did not last and left the family broken, and now her child is faced with the same decisions that we all basically face. Why not go after the dream? Nothing wrong with that as long as they are based in reality, but false idols who have nothing to offer is nothing to go after. There are three companions Sarah has during her journey. Each represent a part of her and her ability to navigate through the labyrinth. The flawed, mistaken, but teachable man is Hoggle, vacillating between well-meaning, trained by evil, but learning the good. He learns to put value in friendship over fear. Next, there's the inner strength that must be unlocked, strength to call on unseen or unknown help, a reminder that worldly forces are going to shame you for choosing that which is right and good, to quiet your voice when you speak truth. But despite the goblin voices, you have the strength to do what is right. You can choose the right thing. And finally, Sir Didymus is the determination to do what is right and proper. At the end of the film, she reminds us that these companions were not just a one-time thing, but can be called on throughout her life. Taking responsibility to see the truth, to grow up, to experience and fight the world does not mean you are void to fun and humor. It just sets the bounds where they need to be. For me, the key to understanding this film is the crystal ball that Jareth, the Goblin King, offers Sarah. It is first given as a gift that will give her power, and later it is given as a trick in the form of a peach. The gift and trick, spheres, is a reference to you giving into your fantasy and forgetting your responsibility or taking responsibility. It is also a reference to her sexuality. It can be a gift if used properly, and a trick if it's done just to satisfy a hungry desire. The sequence in the movie is pretty straightforward imagery. She takes a bite of the peach and is transported by floating crystal balls into a ballroom with dancing, masks, dresses, and alluring music. She feels trapped and escapes and falls into a world of garbage after having that experience, only to find that the peach has a worm crawling out of it and is rotten inside. And the next phrase we hear from Hoggle is, "You know, she will never forgive me." The theme is throughout the movie and echoes that of the fantasy and reality already discussed. There is what the world tells you and the reality behind it. It can be a gift if done properly, and it can be destructive and depressing if not. The extreme example comes in the Fire Gang with the Chili Down song. The fantasy is they only want a good time, no problems, no suitcase, no clothes, etc.
Don't got no problem, no problem. Ain't got no suitcase, ain't got no clothes to worry about.
The reality is the cost of such a life. It is a display of the dark, deformed, and troubling creatures where their heads are not permanently attached to their bodies. If you liken this to the topic of virtue or sexuality, you know the gift has bounds that are already set. We are taught sex is a union between committed, married husband and wife, and it requires total obligation. In contrast to the song of No Suitcase, it requires the whole suitcase. If it is done hastily, inappropriately, and without commitment, you enter the realm of moral schizophrenia, headless, legless, deformed, and without purpose. One final image from this film for review is the garbage lady. After Sarah's peach experience, she forgets the child, her responsibility, and she attempts to remember. The garbage lady offers her dolls and toys, fantasy ideas that are fun as a distraction. I thought this was one of the best parts of the movie. The fantasy is a distraction from growth and responsibility. It's the distraction from achieving your actual goals. In summary, Labyrinth is a film about growing up. The danger in growth fantasies that have no consequences, and the reality that growth requires you to take responsibility. It is common to have desire to be loved, to be wanted, needed, to find purpose. And I think the film says desires need to be cooled and controlled, not obeyed. There is a way to navigate through a confusing and troubling time in your life, a labyrinth. Overcoming the false fantasy lies, courageously facing fears, unlocking your inner strength, and maintaining your integrity. Fantasy can be fun. It can be a way to tell a moral tale that encourages us in reality. But if we spend too much time there, we may find our life filled with frustration and disappointments. If you want to grow up, take down the pop star posters on your wall, clean off your bed, and start living your actual life. There is a lot of things in this film that I did not discuss, and lots more we could talk about. Since I didn't get to hear your thoughts on the movie, maybe you could tell me in the comments below. Thanks for watching.
What did you expect fairies to do?
I thought they did nice things, like granting wishes.
Huh? Shows what you know, don't it?
She treats me like a wicked stepmother in a fairy story no matter what I say.
I'll talk to her.